Hi there everyone, and welcome to part 1 of 2 videos welcoming you to the water rehabilitation framework. So as you can see, I've got the software application over here. If I just go ahead and double click on it, you will see that the application loads. So this is your welcoming homepage. And before I go ahead and start showing you how to start creating your system and using this software, I just want to give you a brief introduction and background to what this application is all about. So this Waterway Rehabilitation Framework application is a tool for collecting data and information on waterways, determining the nature of degradation for various sections of these waterways, and facilitating the selection as well as prioritizing rehabilitation options. The software was developed through Water and Research Commission's funding and supported by the Department of Water and Sanitation with regards to provision of data and other relevant information. The company that went about creating this software was a company called Nxt2u. I will be sure to include their information, email address at the end of this video, as well as the part 2 video that will be coming shortly in case you have any questions or queries. Alright, so now that you have your brief introduction to the software, I am now going to show you how you can go about starting to add to this system and creating your waterway system. So when you want to start adding, the first thing you want to do is top left over here, this add button. As soon as you click it, you see that the software automatically adds these 3 default waterway name, scenario name, and subsystem name. Within the default subsystem name, we also have river-based and riparian-based points and reaches. For now, I'm going to leave those. We'll get back to those in a bit. The first thing we can start doing though is renaming these default names to better suit our project. So if you simply go and double click on the name, so for example this default waterway name, double click on it and this dialog box appears. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and fill in the necessary information for my study area, which is the Pinars River, which falls just outside Pretoria in Gauteng, South Africa. As you can see, I have filled in the waterway name as the Pinars River. The waterway description, again, I just put Pinars River, but please feel free to include a more holistic and in-depth description based on your study project. And then when we get down here to the GIS map center, it's basically referring to the GIS map that we will be creating a little on in this video. So basically what we're setting here, the X and Y coordinates is what the map is going to automatically zoom to. So you want to set that to the X and Y coordinates of your study area, and the zoom level is the automatic zoom of that GIS map. If you were to leave the zoom level blank, it does have a default value of 13, but I went ahead and set it to 17 because I prefer that level. So once that is all filled in, you can go ahead and click save, can close that, and as you can see, that waterway name has now been renamed. If I double click on it, you can see that information is present and filled in. I'm now going to go do the same for default scenario name. If I simply double click on it, this dialog box appears. I'm now going to go ahead and rename the scenario name and description. Once those 2 variables have been filled in, we then get to this river reach section. So if you go and click on the drop down now, you can see that both of these start point and end points are empty. That is because we don't have that information just yet. We'll get back to that river reach part towards the end of the video. Then as you move on, you get to this period section. So what you can do is you can either manually enter your start year, end year, and data start of month, or what you can do is you can go ahead and import quality data, which will then automatically update and insert this information for you. So what this quality data is referring to, it is data courtesy of the Department of Water and Sanitation. It's basically an Excel sheet like this one that contains all of the necessary information about almost every point, inline waterway point or riparian based point within the waterway system. So if I go ahead and import this quality data, then the start and end year is automatically going to update to the start and end year within said quality data. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and imported it. The years have updated, and what I can do now is go ahead and click Save, and I can close that dialog box. The last thing we need to rename and fill in with necessary information is this default subsystem name. If I go ahead and double click on it, I can simply just go and fill in the necessary information. Once that information has been filled in, click Save, and there you go. So as you can see, all of those defaults have been renamed, filled in, and what we can now move on to doing is starting to add river-based, as well as then moving on to riparian-based points and reaches within our waterway system. So with regards to river-based points, if you go ahead and click the little plus sign next to point, you can see that these are the already default options for river-based points. So basically options that you have to pick from that are a point that could fall within this river-based system. Similarly, if you drop down the reach, these are the different types of reaches that can fall within this river-based system. So a reach is basically describing how different points within the system are connecting to one another. So what I'd like to quickly show you is if you would like to add a point or reach within your system, but they do not already appear within these default values, what you can do is if you go ahead and click System and edit the system-wide settings, you get this table. If you drop down and select Waterway Object Subtype, you can see that this is where your default values for points, P, as well as reaches are loaded. If I wanted to add a value or an option, it's very simple. You go ahead and click the plus sign here for Insert Record, and as you can see, an empty row has now been added here at the top. So let's say, for example, I wanted to add a point. As we can see, the points all have an object type ID of 1. So I go ahead and insert 1. The object subtype I will say is 11 because the last one here is 10. These values over here I'm just going to name test, but you would obviously name them specific to the point that you're adding, and I'm going to go ahead and say P. Once I've filled that in, I can do this click this tick button which says post edit, and as you can see, that test option has now been added to my waterway object subtype table. Similarly to adding, it's very simple to delete options. So if I were to just go ahead and highlight this option like I did over there, and just simply click this minus sign, delete record, click OK, and as you can see, that test has now been deleted from the table. Right, so going back to wanting to add some river-based points, the first thing we can do is go ahead and load our GIS map. So to load the map, you simply just click this GIS button over here, top left, and as you can see, the map automatically loads to my study area of Pretoria. This automatically loading of the study area as well as the zoom level was what I was referring to in a couple steps back when you filled in that information. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom into the Pinars River study area. So based on my prior knowledge of the study area, I know that this over here is where the Pinars River starts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a point to signify the start of this river. So if I drop down on points, there is no specific start for river, but if I wanted to, I could go ahead and add that via the system settings like I showed you. But for now, I'm just going to add it under a general option. So what you're going to do is you're going to highlight general. going to highlight the type of point that you'd like to add. So once that is highlighted, if you hover over where you'd like to add it and right click, you can see that these options now appear. If you select add point here, this dialog box appears. So this dialog box is how you are going to now capture the information about the point you are adding. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and fill in this necessary information. The point type is set to general and you are unable to change that. That general is obviously because we selected general here in the point option. The point code is P1. That automatically increases, so I'm going to leave that as the default value. But what I can do is I can go ahead and rename the point name, fill in a point description, and the point ID. As you can see, I've renamed it to the start of the Pinos River, and the point ID for this specific point I'm going to leave empty, but within the next point that I add, I will be referring to that point ID. So for now, let's just leave that as blank. As you can see, the GIS X and Y coordinates have automatically been included and updated because we went ahead and added the point via the GIS map, so it can automatically be captured. So once that is all filled in, I can go ahead and click Save and close that box. So as you can see now, under General, the start of the Pinos River has been added. And when we go ahead and zoom to that area where we added it, we can see that this pin has now been dropped. You are able to double click on the pin and you can get that information about the point that you've added. Alright, so the next point that I will be adding is a dam. It's called the Boskop Dam. So the first step I'm going to do is go ahead and zoom into that dam. The dam falls over here, just a little bit lower in the system than the start of the river. So like we did when we added the start of the river, if you first go ahead and highlight the type of point you are adding, which in this case is dam, I can now go and hover over the dam, right click and say add point here. So the point type is set to dam/weir because that is a type that we selected over here under the point options. The point code, as you can see, has automatically incremented now to P2, so I'm going to leave that. The point name, point ID and point description, however, I can go ahead and fill in. So as you can see, I have renamed the point name and point description with the name of the dam. And now we get here to the point ID, which I referred to when we added our first point. So what this point ID is referring to is it is a unique code that is allowing us to be connecting our data quality set back to our system that we are creating. So for example over here, this is the Boskop Dam. If I go back to my data quality set, I have filtered it to just show that specific point. So if I go ahead and copy this ID and I paste it here into point ID, basically it is now allowing this point that I'm creating to connect back to that data quality set and allow for this point to gain the information that's been captured in that Excel sheet. So if I go now and go ahead and click Save, I can then close this window, and zooming into where we've added the point, you can see another pin has been dropped. Double clicking on the pin, all of the necessary information has been added. Okay, so moving on to the third point that I will be adding. It is a confluence that is happening right next to the N4 highway. So if I go ahead and zoom into where that confluence is occurring, which is right about over here, first I'm going to go ahead and highlight the type of point it is. So as I said, it is a confluence. I can then hover over it, right click and say add point here. Again, like I've been doing, I can go ahead and fill in the necessary information, point name, point ID from the data quality set, and the point description. In this specific case, the point ID is left blank again because there is no data quality attached to this point. So once I've filled in that information, I can just go ahead and click Save and close that box. Zooming back to the area, we can see a pin has been dropped, so we are happy with that. I will now move on to adding my final point. There are obviously more points, but for this video I will just be adding a couple to demonstrate how you can go about adding them. So the fourth point I will be adding is an impact point. It is resulting from an informal settlement that is occurring along the Pinars River. So if I go ahead and zoom to the study area where this impact point is occurring, it is round about over here in this empty space. So if I go ahead and select general because it falls under the general heading, I can then hover over where I'd like to add it, right click and say add point here. I can then go ahead and fill in the necessary information. Once filled in, I can go ahead and click save, and now I can close that box. Upon zooming back to the study area, we can see that pin has been dropped, and if we go ahead and zoom out now, we can see that the system is starting to come together nicely. So now that our river-based points have been added, the next step I'd like to show you is how we can go ahead and now add our river-based reaches. So in other words, how these points are joining together. So with regards to my study area, the reaches between each 4 points are all rivers. So obviously that is specific to your study area. But similar to how we were adding points, the first thing you'd like to do is highlight the option. So like I said, there are rivers, so I'm highlighting river. You have the option of pipe, canal, tributary, aqueduct, but if these options do not suit what you're looking for, then as I showed previously, you can go ahead and manually add through the system settings. So I've highlighted river, and because this is now signifying a stretch and an area of land that is connecting 2 points, you cannot go and simply click on the map. So what you're going to do is you're going to highlight it and click this add button on the top left. After clicking the add button, this box appears. The reach type is set to river because we selected river. The reach code is automatically generated to R1, which automatically increases. The reach name and reach description, however, I can go ahead and rename. I've renamed the reach the 2 points that are connecting, so it's from the start of the Pinars River going through to that Boschkop dam that we added. We now move on to this points section. It's basically telling the software which points are connecting. So the start point is the start of the Pinars River, the end point is that Boschkop dam. It is also possible to add pictures. It is possible to add pictures to any of the points and reaches for either river-based or riparian-based. I'll just show you a quick example. If you go ahead and click on the pictures button, you can go ahead and click the add button. Let's say I wanted to load that picture. As you can see, it's now been loaded. Similarly, if it's highlighted, you can just click delete and the picture is removed. So you have that option to just kind of make your data a lot more in-depth, a lot more holistic if you'd like to add pictures. Once that information has been filled in, I can go ahead and click save. I can close that window. And as we can see, that reach has now been added between those 2 points. So that reach is basically signifying the river that is running between these 2 points. I'm now going to go ahead and add a river reach that is running between my second and my third point. So again, I go ahead and highlight river. I click add. I can rename the reach. I renamed it according to the 2 points that are connecting, which is that Boschkop dam and the N4 confluence. And again, we set our start point as the dam and our end point as the confluence. I can go ahead and click save, close that. And as we can see, that reach between these 2 points has been added. I'll now go ahead and add my final river-based reach, which is falling between this 3rd point and our final 4th point of that impact point. Go ahead and highlight river, click add, and fill in the necessary information. Once that has all been filled in, I can go ahead and set my start as well as my end points. Click save, close that, and as we can see, that reach has been added. So upon zooming out, that whole system has now been captured. So what we are now going to move on to doing is capturing riparian-based points and reaches. So what riparian is referring to is any point or reach that is occurring along the banks of a river. So basically it's points or reaches that are having effect on the waterway system but don't actually occur within the actual river line itself. So as you can see, we've got points options as well as reach options. They're the same options as river-based. Again, if these do not suit your specific study or your project, then you do have the option to go and manually edit and change them via the system-wide settings. Alright, so let's start off by adding some riparian-based points. The first point I'd like to add is the Water Lake Estate. So it is an estate that is occurring along the Pinage River, and any runoff that is occurring from that estate is flowing into the river. So the first thing I'd like to do is zoom into where the estate is occurring. So the estate is right about over here, running into the Boskop-Tennis Dam as well as the Pinage River. So as we did before with the river-based points, the first thing we'd like to do is highlight the option. I'm going to go ahead and highlight settlement because it is an estate, and then I'm going to hover over where I'd like to add it, right click and say add point here. I can then go ahead and fill in the information. Once the point name and point description have been filled in, as well as the point ID, thus allowing the link between this system and the quality data set to be formed, I can go ahead and click save and close that box. As you can see, that estate has now been added and captured. So the second riparian-based point that I will be adding is the Silver Lakes Estate, which is a very large estate occurring just outside of Pretoria, that again has its effluent and its runoff running straight into the Pinage River. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and zoom into where the Silver Lakes Estate is occurring. So it's over here, as we can see. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight settlement again, for it's an estate, hover over Silver Lakes, and right click. So add point here and fill in my information. Once it's all filled in, I can go ahead and click save, can close that window, and as we can see, the Silver Lakes pin has been dropped. Right, so now moving on to riparian-based reaches. So basically explaining how these riparian-based points, the two estates that I have captured, are connecting back to our river or back to our waterway system. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a reach for our very first riparian-based point that we created, which was this over here, the Water Lake Estate. So the Water Lakes Estate is connecting back to the Boskop-Tennis Dam via a tributary. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight tributary as the option. Because it's a stretch of area and a stretch of land, I cannot go and click on the map similar to when we captured the river-based reach. So by highlighting tributary, I can then go ahead and click add and fill in the information for this tributary riparian reach. Once I've filled in the reach name and reach description, I can then move down to this points section that is then telling us which points are connecting. So the start point is the Water Lake Estate, and the end point is the Boskop-Tennis Dam, because that is where the estate runoff is running into. We then get to this reach joining river. So the reach joining river over here defines the side that it is joining from. The estate is to the left of the river, so I'm going to select left, and over here you can change the angle, but for now I'm just going to leave it as the default 30 degrees. Once I've filled that all in, I can save that, close it, and as we can see, that tributary reach has been added. I will now do the same to connect the Silver Lakes Estate back to the Pinage River. So upon zooming to the Silver Lakes Estate, again it's via a tributary, so I can highlight the tributary option, click add, and fill in my information. Once the reach name and reach description has been captured, I can go ahead and set the points. So the start point is the Silver Lakes Estate, the end point is the N4 confluence. Again, the estate is to the left of the river, so I select left, and again I will leave the angle as 30 degrees. Go ahead and click save, and as we can see, that tributary riparian based reach has now been captured. So upon zooming out, we can see now that the system has really come together very nicely. We've got our river-based points and reaches running along here, which in part 2 video we will be referring to as the inline points and reaches, and then over here to the left we've got our riparian based points and reaches connecting back to our waterway system. So once the GIS map has been completed, you've added all of your river-based and riparian-based points and reaches, we can now move on to creating a much more simplified diagram version of this via this schematic view. So if you go ahead and click on schematic, you can see that your home page is still blank. So the first thing we need to do before we can start building the schematic diagram is defining the starts and the end points of our system. So if you go ahead and double click on the Pinars River scenario, this river reach, which I mentioned right in the beginning of the video, is now what we need to define. So the start point we define as the start of the Pinars River. The end point we can define as that informal settlement impact point. Once that has all been filled in, can click save, close that, and now we are ready to start building our schematic diagram. So once that's been added, you can go ahead and click here at the bottom, click build. From there you can see our table is still empty, so we need to add values. So if you click on the add button, basically what you're doing is you want to add each and every reach name that you have here into your table. Once those have been added, you can click close, and as you can see, your schematic diagram is automatically generated. So with the schematic diagram, like I said, it's a lot more of a simplified version of your GIS map. You're able to manually play around with it, so you have that option to do so. You can also go ahead and double click on any of the points as well as any of the reaches to gain the information about said points and reaches. Alright, so that is the wrap up of part 1. Please stay tuned, where I will then be doing the last part 2, where I'll be showing you how you can go about getting more information about the degradation status of this waterway system, as well as how you can start generating reports to make better decisions on rehabilitation options and how you can go about prioritizing these options. So stay tuned, and I'll see you for part 2.